YouTube, what's up? And welcome. This is second video. Where do we begin? So this is my 1999 Volvo V70 that I have completely converted into a 1998, or otherwise known as Motronic 4.4 car. I do know there's a couple people in the world that have done this. As far as in the United States are concerned, I know of two people that attempted it, and one person got the car started, but none of the interior stuff would work. And the other person got all the interior stuff to work, got the power windows to work, sunroof, interior lighting, so on and so forth, but the car would never start again. And I really think this is something that I should document, because there's just no information on this at all. I had to do a lot of figuring out. I mean, I have so many PDF files of wiring diagrams and connector pinouts, and I mean, just stuff that I'm never honestly gonna use again. But it's what I needed to be able to get to this point. So the first question I get asked a lot is, what all is involved in doing this swap? And what I tell everybody is, the best way to do this swap is you need to have a 98 car right next to it. And then a lot of people ask, well, if I have a 98 car right next to it, why don't I just take my stuff out of my 99 and put it in my 98? Go for it. By all means. Because your life will be 1,000 times easier than having to go through what I went through with this car. I get asked a lot, why did I do this? Why didn't I just take my own advice and go find a 98 and take everything out of here and put it in a 98? And the truthful answer is, I'm in Florida. These cars, in Florida especially, the sun is not kind to them. The heat destroys these cars. If you own a P80 Volvo, okay, now please don't start freaking out on me. If you own a P80 Volvo, you know the interiors in these cars are shit. Okay? Here in Florida, as far as paint goes on Florida cars, Florida P80 cars, unless somebody really cared for it since it was bought, most of the time the paint is completely shot. There's no more clear coat on them. The dashes are so destroyed that they're literally being held on by a wiring harness. That's the only thing holding the dash up against the firewall. This car was too clean for me to just rip everything out of it and stick it in another car, because I was not going to find a 98. And trust me, I looked. I stooped down to the point where I said, you know what? Let me try and find a 98 before I attempt to do this. Obviously, I didn't find a 98. So, the next question I get asked is, what all had to be done? Instead of me sitting here and talking for probably 2 hours explaining to you every little detail and every little thing that had to be replaced, The easiest thing I can tell you is every wire from here to the back tail lights has to be removed out of this car. All of it. When you're done, there is not a wire left in this car. Is it doable? Absolutely. I did this entire harness swap in my driveway. And for me, it took 2 days. It was it was 2 days. It was a Thursday and a Friday. And truthfully, it only took me 2 days because when I pulled the dash out of this car, it just crumbled. And I could not put another dash back in it. So I had to go into my hoard of parts and find my clean can dash. So that kind of put me back a day. So other than that, as I was doing the swap, that was really only like the real major thing that went wrong was the dash crumbling in pieces, and I didn't happen to have my spare one with me at the time. I had to wait till the next morning and go grab it and bring it back here and get it ready to go back into the car. I guess we'll start under the hood. So the original plan when I was planning to do this, before I had any type of information or anything or wiring diagrams or anything like that, my original plan was I was just going to replace the engine harness. I was going to replace the engine harness, and for anybody who has dived real deep into P80s, underneath here, this is your engine control module, and if you're an automatic, you'll have a transmission control module, and if you're a stick, you just have a module for cruise control and reverse lights and whatever. But underneath these computers, there's actually a chassis connector. So that chassis connector, that runs your reverse light wiring through the fuse box all the way to your reverse lights. That also runs your starter circuit from the starter relay to here. And I believe and then that's also your 12 volt for your ECU, for your injectors and other sensors and things like that are needed to run the engine. So when I first started getting ready to do this swap, in my head, I kept telling myself, there's no way that Volvo would change everything. There's no way. And boy, let me tell you guys, I was freaking wrong. So when I went to the donor car, which I didn't have with me, the donor car was actually at a family member's shop. It had no engine, no transmission. It was just a car that was just sitting for parts, and I was told, whatever you need out of it, take it. So I had went like 2 weeks before I started doing this, and so as I'm getting ready to do this, I go over there, I go to pull all the engine harness out of this car, right? So I start pulling the engine harness, and then I start realizing, I'm like, man, maybe I'm going to have to pull the whole harness that runs up through here, and I'm probably going to have to take this main fuse box, and I'm going to have to take this chassis harness here, and I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. All that, it all disconnects. So I knew it all disconnected, and it all disconnects once you lift this fuse panel up. With this fuse panel, there's a main chassis connect, which basically all that does is marry everything from firewall forward to everything under the dash. So I had this whole fuse box, whole chassis harness on the driver's side, front, I should say. I had the whole front driver's side chassis harness, the whole front passenger side chassis harness, and the entire ECU wiring, ECU engine wiring. And that's when I started going through the engine harness and simplifying things, cleaning up the harness. It's kind of hard to see it in this terrible lighting. Okay, there we go. So you can kind of see there my harness. Everything is reloomed. It's shielded with Tesa tape over it, and then I pretty much reroute the entire Volvo harness so everything kind of runs under the intake, and it's kind of more spread out, a little more tucked away. It really just cleans the engine bay up a lot. But so anyways, back to doing this swap. So I get all the parts. I get all the parts I need. Sensors and the intake and the throttle body and cap, rotor, wires, ignition coil, all that stuff. So I get all that, and me and my dad, we planned this out. My dad was a humongous help with this. He's a humongous help with a lot of things that I do. No matter how crazy the idea is, he's right there next to me, and he's running full speed at it just like I am. So we plan it out. I show up there on Thursday morning, and no time at all. I've got the entire engine harness out. I've got the whole front chassis harness. I got the fuse box out and all that stuff. And I'm pulling the dashboard, because the reason why we had to pull the dashboard originally is because, for anybody who doesn't know, the wiring, the way how these cars are, when you pull the dashboard out, there's actually a harness that is clipped into place on the physical dash, and then it has a chassis connect that plugs into the rest of the chassis harness. So I already knew from years before that the harnesses in the dashes are different. Different wires are pinned into different places into the connector. So I said, okay, that's fine. I got to pull the dash anyways. And then that's when the dash kind of crumbled on me. And we were like, you know what? That's fine. We don't need a dash in the car to make it run. You know, I can lay the 98 dash harness inside the car and just plug everything in and crudely just kind of hang the cluster over to one side, and we'd be able to get it to start and whatnot. So part of this chassis harness that runs off this fuse box, there's a loom that runs along the top side of the firewall here. Not the loom that's on the dash, but there's a separate harness that runs along the top. And that basically is a chassis connect for fuel pump, seats. There's two main grounds that run on the passenger side, and rear ABS. The driver side, so got to kind of picture how this harness goes. When it comes off this box, goes over to the passenger side, to the end of the dash there, and it stops. The driver side, it runs down along the side of the chassis, and it goes all the way back to where the tail light is, and then it'll make a left, and then that joins over to the other tail light. So my dad is laying that harness down along this side, and I've already got this side here, and I'm getting ready to connect the 98 harness to the 99 chassis. And that is when I realized that this was way more complicated than swapping an engine front harness. just looking at the two connectors, me personally, I have a lot of this stuff memorized on these cars, so I know solid light pink wire, that's fuel pump trigger. That is your power trigger wire that turns the pump on when you turn the key on. So I'm looking at the 98 harness that I took from the donor car, and I can see the light pink fuel pump wire, and I was using that as a reference. So I grabbed the 99 connector, which on a 99, it's still a light pink fuel pump wire. And if you ever look at the actual chassis harness connector, it's the only light pink wire in the whole harness. And I go to connect the two together, and I see light pink fuel pump wire is here for a 98, and on a 99, it's all the way over here. And right there, I said, nope. I told my dad, I said, just stop. We have to go back to the donor car. And my dad's like, well, why? What's going on? I said, we got to take the rest of the harness out of that car. You know, and my dad just kind of looked at me, and he's like, what are you talking about? We have to take the whole... I said, we have to take the whole harness. I said, everything has to come out of that car. So we kind of laugh about it for a little bit, and then we kind of realize, like, what the hell did we just get ourselves into? So now we're getting in his truck, and we're going over to where the car is, and show up, and I start just tearing the entire interior apart. Everything out of this car. All the chassis harness on the right side to where it goes to the fuel pumps, to the ABS connectors, everything out the back. The whole sunroof wiring, dome light wiring, and all that. I didn't want to take any chances. In my head, I was like, man, that's really simple. It's just powers and grounds that get switched on when you open and close the door, when you turn the overhead light switch on. But then I sat there and went, yeah, well, I thought the same thing about the whole chassis harness, and I was wrong about that. So let me take that too. Take all that. Bring everything, lay it all out on the floor. Assess. I was putting tape on certain connectors that I knew exactly what they were, just to kind of map it out so I knew where I was running the harness all throughout the car. And by that time, it was probably like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and I was like, you know what, I gotta go get the other dash anyway, so we left it at that. That was the end of the first day of this. Then the second day, it was kind of weird, because it was like we were just building a car like on the assembly line. I mean, everything just went right back in place. Everything was there. The only thing I really noticed with the 99 was, on the 99, there's a ground underneath the rear passenger seat lower cushions, and there's only one. It's on the driver's side. On a 98, it has two, one on each side of the rear seat. And the right side one, I don't know if this is on all cars, but I know on this car, the bung for the, I guess the bung, right? Yeah, it would be the bung. The threaded portion in the chassis to put a bolt in to bolt the ground down. My threads were, there was just none there. It was just a bung with no threads. So we actually had to tap threads into it so we could be able to put that ground where it needed to go. But yeah, once we did that, swapped the dash harness over, I put the dash in, and it was pretty crazy. It was, once that part was done, I put the key in, and car started up like it had been a 98 its whole life. And of course, naturally, the first thing I did once it idled for about 20 seconds is I just revved it to the moon, let it tap the limiter, because I never heard this car hit limiter for 2 years. That it was stuck at 4,000 RPM, but yeah, that's pretty much all that really needed to be done. I mean, again, Is it something I recommend for somebody else to do? Really depends on your situation. You know, my situation, truthfully, I got quoted almost $1,000 to tune the car, and that was when it was a 2.3 with a 16T, blue injectors, and a manual swap. And I just thought that was outrageous. And I have more experience with 4.4. I do everything on this car. So like, I use Tuner Pro with this car to be able to adjust my fuel, my timing, and boost and all that stuff. So to me, it was way more worth it to me to convert the car to 4.4 because it was such a clean car, and just because I have the experience with 4.4 better. Don't get me wrong, ME7 is a great system, especially when you've got somebody that's capable of being able to get to be able to have the car tuned right and make good power. It really is a great system. For me personally, I just never liked it from the start. Then once we finished that, buttoned everything up, and I drove the car around for probably like 4 months. Everything was working besides the speedo. That was our next mountain that we had to overcome. I had to get the speedo to work in this car. Put a brand new ABS module in it. Still wasn't getting the speedo to work. When I had did this harness swap, the one thing I never changed was the ABS wheel speed sensors. I left the 99 wheel speed sensors in, and I just basically cut the connector off and replaced it with a connector for a 98 and spliced it into the harness, thinking it would work. Well, it doesn't. 98, 99 wheel speed sensors, they both read at two totally different frequencies. So then came the next challenge, which was on a 99 or anything after 98 P80 car, they use a different wheel speed sensor. So it's actually it's a physically smaller wheel speed sensor. So I have a 98 sensor here. So you can kind of see it is a lot larger than it. I mean, a 98 wheel speed sensor is probably the size of this small circle here. And in the cast spindles, there's no way you can get this to go in. Now, we could have measured this, found a drill bit, drilled the hole open, and I'm sure it would have just dropped right in and bolted in place. I didn't want to do that. For whatever reason, I felt like that was just going to be more headache trying to drill through my spindle, and then my luck, I would nick my tone ring on my axle, and it would just turn into a nightmare. So at that point, that's when I went to the junkyard, found me a 98, took the front, just the front 98 spindles, and swapped them over into this car, put the 98 sensors in, wired the connectors, took it for a drive, and the speedo started working. This car only has 98 wheel speed sensors in the front. The rears are still 99. The 98 harness is the same connector as the rears. It plugged in. I don't know if they read at a different frequency or not. At this point, it really doesn't matter because the speedo's working. But once that was done, that was pretty much it. I mean, finally the car was it was no longer in its 4,000 RPM rev limit. It was working how it's supposed to. And to this day, we know, me and my dad, we know a lot of Volvo technicians, guys that have worked on Volvos for, 30 plus years. And we show them this car, and I tell them what I did, and they look at me like I'm crazy. They're like, there's no way. I said, I promise you that's what we did. There's no way. It's run the VIN. That's what I tell them. Run the VINs, man. But yeah. That's going to do it for this one. Leave me a comment down below. Give me a thumbs up. The last video with my wife Saab, we've got almost 500 views on that video. And truthfully, I couldn't be more excited. It's so cool to see so many people finding that video and watching it, and just getting messages from people like on Instagram and stuff, asking for more and excited to see the car on YouTube like that. That's really cool. It's quite amazing, the power of YouTube. But other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Goodbye.